All right, we're going to talk about water, and water is really important because it is so good at being a solvent. It's called the common solvent or even the universal solvent. And what does that really mean? We'll discuss it. Water is probably the most important substance on earth because of the number of different substances that will dissolve in it. It's both a blessing and a curse. A lot of things can dissolve in water that are useful to make solutions, but some things dissolve in water that we don't want dissolved, like things that come from fertilizer that can cause pollution, for example. One thing that you should know about water is that water is considered a polar molecule, and the reason that it's polar is because of the way the molecule is shaped. Here we have an oxygen molecule, and the electrons that are shared between oxygen and hydrogen are drawn more tightly towards oxygen. And so it's slightly negative over here. This symbol, I'll write it up here, means slightly. So it's slightly negative by oxygen and slightly positive by each of these hydrogens. And that means that when water molecules are near each other, there's an attraction between them. So it is a polar molecule because of its unequal charge distribution. All things that are polar have slightly positive and slightly negative ends.
An ionic solid dissolves in water because of its polar nature. Notice how water molecules become attached to the ions of a sodium chloride crystal in the process called hydration. Positively charged sodium ions attract the partial negative charge of the oxygen in water. A similar attraction occurs between negative.
So if you look over here, we have right here, this is a positive ion. This would be a sodium ion. I can tell it's positive because it's near the oxygens, the red atoms in this water molecule, and opposite charges attract.
Negatively charged chloride ions and the hydrogen atoms, which have a partial positive charge. These interactions loosen the attractions between the ions in the.
Here we have chloride in the middle of these water molecules, and it would be surrounded by water molecules. Chloride is negative. The slightly positive hydrogens surround it because opposite charges attract.
In the crystal, dislodging them from the crystal. Additional water molecules surround the released ions, insulating them from attraction to other ions.
Some terms that you should know about water solutions, and those are called aqueous solutions. These are water-based. Solution is a homogeneous mixture between two things. One of them is the solute, that's what is dissolved. You could think of salt. The solvent is what does the dissolving. In an aqueous solution, that means that it's water is the solvent. The term soluble means that that substance, the solute, can be dissolved. We use the term miscible to say that two liquids will dissolve in each other, rather than using the term soluble. Miscible is reserved for liquids. And electrolytes are substances that produce a current when they're dissolved in water, and we'll discuss that in the next video. One thing that's important to note is that this concept of like dissolves like will explain what is and is not soluble in water. Water is a polar solvent, so it will dissolve other things that are polar. Examples of this might include any kind of an alcohol molecule or something like acetone, which is nail polish remover, that would also dissolve. Polar solvents dissolve most ionic solutes. Now, polar molecules have a slightly positive and a slightly negative end. Ionic solutes, like we could have sodium chloride or calcium carbonate or lithium hydroxide, something like that, those have positive and negative ions. This is positive 2, negative 2, positive 1, negative 1. So ionic solutes have positive and negative charges. And the idea of like dissolves like. Charged things are attracted to other charged things, and that makes them alike. Nonpolar solvents do not dissolve polar solutes. This would be something like oil, or another thing would be hexane. Those substances are nonpolar, And they do not dissolve polar solutes because polar solutes have slightly positive and slightly negative ends. These are not alike. And that's why they do not dissolve, do not dissolve in each other.